recording now. Just some general kind of things for today. Thank you all for being here. Appreciate it. I know for Mocha, this probably won't be as helpful for P1 stuff because I'm just kind of going over a couple things that we need to work on. You'll probably see some clips and it might be helpful. But if you want, I can help you with stuff later. For everyone else, though, there's some nerfs that just occurred for Tindral. That'll be up on Tuesday. I have looked a little bit into them, tried to figure out how they're going to affect us. No clue how the fire beam change in P1s will affect us, so that's something we're just going to have to see. We also get the less roots, or not the less roots, the less feathers that we need to totally soak for Dragon Riders, but we're still going to try to soak 4 at a time. Because we want to mitigate the amount of roots that we have. The only other thing to note is that I'm going to be looking at signing the yellow feathers to people, the ones that we kind of just had people randomly take before. I'm actually going to be assigning them as we go to next week, but that'll be more of a refined raid plan as we get there. So things we're going to go over P1 that we've done thus far, just a couple notes on that. We're going to go over the intermission that we are planning to do because we've seen it a couple times, but we haven't had a lot of people live to actually go to the correct spots. Then we're going to talk about P2 prog, and then we'll just kind of have it open up for questions as we go, and then mainly after. So after I do a segment, I'll stop and kind of ask people if questions. We can answer them, try to find whatever information we need to find, and then we will go to the next one. I'm planning on posting this to YouTube when it's done, so just keep that in mind. As far as these coming back, we'll probably do 1 to 2 more for Tindral, and then hopefully 2 to 3 for Farak before we finish the tier. Thus far, just for general explanation of what we're going over, does anyone have any general questions of what I'm going to be talking about today, or does anyone need to ask about something else while we are here? Okay. P1, our main points that we need to work on is we need to make sure that our Dragon Riding teams are being on top of the feathers as they spawn. We need our melee to be a little bit more conservative about dodging mushrooms and swirls because we had a lot of just deaths to them early. For the ranged, we're just getting into good placements for our dispels, and mainly the second ones that we do at 50 seconds we have to be quicker with. And then generally, we need to set a standard of how we are going to approach mechanics because we're going to be doing them for the whole 7 minutes of the fight. We're only really a minute into the fight, I'd say, in terms of our progression. So we have 6 more minutes to kind of repeat those and just do the same mechanics that we are learning now for every single one. The first one that I want to talk about is our feather locations. I know that there was quite a bit of talk about who's taking what feather and all that stuff, but I wanted to clarify, and I have a lot of Posner's stream here that he's has the VOD of. If anyone wants the VOD, I can actually just post it in one of the chats later, and you can look through it, see certain things. I do have timestamps up if you guys do want to write these down to kind of look at the things that I'm showing. But in general, this is the earlier part of our night, and this is when we have the swirlies into mushrooms and dispels come out, and I want to make sure that we have people going to the right spots. This is our first set of people that are doing the dragon riding. And again, as far as our raid plan goes, we want to have 2 of the feathers that spawn closest to the dispels be the ones that are the quote-unquote yellow feathers or off limits, and the other 4 should be relatively easy and safe to get to. So as I replay this and we have these spawn, you can see that there is one that's in the fire over here. That is 100% a yellow seed. We also have 2 others that are kind of near it, but you have to think about our positioning in the general part of the fight. This one over here on the right is going to be near person dispel 4. So as far as ground effects, there's not going to be everything over here at all. So this one off to the right side of the screen here, this should be feather number 4. If we go over here to the left one then, this is spawning right next to dispel number 1, which means that as number 1 is expanding in fire, by the time that this feather hits the ground, there will be fire under it. So that would then force this one over here on the far left, that is not in any mechanic, to be feather number 1. So in this kind of picture, we would have feather number 1 be here on the left, feather number 2 down here just above Posner's chat, 3 is kind of in the bottom middle of the screen, and feather 4 is going to be off to the right here. As I just kind of let it play through, we can see that a lot of these feathers are not being taken by the appropriate people. And this is obviously early in our prog, so we didn't have people in them. But most of our prog, looking through all the replays, this one seemed to be 1 frequently, one that Boinky was getting. This would be 2, 3, and 4. So when we're going through this, specifically for our feather group people, we need to make sure that we are being smart with which ones we are taking. And this applies to both groups, all 8 people that'll be soaking feathers in the future, is that the 2 that are in like dangerous positions are the 2 that you guys shouldn't worry about taking at all. This one, as you can see, there's just barely an edge that someone could be standing in. So this one would be Boinky on the first one, and the second one would be Posner. If Boinky or Posner run into this, they're just going to take free damage, and there's just no reason we take free damage on this fight when it's already going to be such a healer check. Same thing with like this one. This one is a really good one for like the third dispel person to just run in and take. So we would assign this one to whoever has the third dispel or a different person. Again, I'm going to be assigning these when we actually get to raid. And then 4 over here, it's just free and out in the open. There's no reason for this person to take it because they haven't gotten their cleanse yet. And so this feather will despawn before they get their cleanse and they have to run in because they're going to be out here from roots. So in this picture, 1 is here and safe, 2 is safe, 3 is safe, and 4 is near the 4th dispel person. So that I think is a pretty big thing that we'll just need to make sure that we clarify for all those people to be in a good position and just not take free damage with the seeds. Or the feathers, I mean. Does anyone have any questions about the feather positionings in general? Okay. This also shows feather positionings, and this has some good and bad to it. And just on top of the feather note, this is an important thing is that when these spawn, same exact idea, 1 here on the right, 2, 3, and 4. That way these 2 at the bottom can be taken by like ranged or by the people that are getting cleansed, and these are like the yellow feathers. It's really important that when these spawn and this happens, so you can see that this replay, like mushrooms are finishing, like this fire beam comes through. The very next thing that you guys have to do when you're dodging this fire beam is just run straight to your things. Don't run through mushrooms because it'll kill you, obviously, but we need to have more agency with getting to these feather spawns. So like when these spawns, you can see here that like we have, it looks like number 2 and number 1 are in their positions, which is good. Again, we're not picking the best possible feather options, as mentioned before, because this one should be 1, 2, 3, and 4. But we did, have some people soak, and that is okay if we make it work. But as you see, we have 2 people that are in them as they spawn. Person 4 is nowhere to be seen. Person 3 is nowhere to be seen. And as we just let this clip play through, we have people that are dragon riding right away and people that dragon ride late. When Tindral finishes his cast and the big red swirly is on the ground, that is the moment in which Dragon Rider should be coming from off screen and crashing in. And unfortunately, if you're just not in the feather as it spawns, right here is when you should be crashing. We have 2, 3, those 2 are good. And then we have someone that just comes super duper late and crashes like back here just into the fire and just dies. Obviously, a lot of these pulls are wipes, but it's the idea of that when we are having the seeds spawn, there needs to be a large amount of agency to get to them. Like this person with circle on their head doing the right thing, this person on X, but every single person for every single set just needs to be in them, not cancel their dragons and just go immediately. Because the more and more we wait, the more and more dangerous it becomes. Especially for this one, the only way we break those roots if all dragons collide, and just having too much time wasted essentially is one of our really large hindrances at the moment. But that's basically everything for the feathers specifically. Does anyone have any questions about the feathers in general? And like we can also talk about like the next couple sets if people need to. Okay. Next thing.
Why
Oh,
aren't
go
you
ahead.
following Paws? Like I understand you can't give him money, but you're not even gonna follow him.
I have him. Well, I'm not even signed in, so but I am
Okay,
following. But
okay.
yeah.
I'm just making sure.
But the next thing I want to look at is melee positioning. Range also will be working on their positioning. I'm going to get to them next. They've been doing a much better job at the end of progression, but we're still having a lot of deaths for melee. And I know that this fight, like, there's not a lot of space, but this is like a pretty good replay of just pretty unfortunate, ability, locations. When we get to the spot, like we have a fire beam that's coming through, so we already know that no one should be under the boss. So you'd want to run like either far or far one direction, and you can see that like just we get absolutely clocked here. The best thing to do in this situation is identifying the fire beam location and then just getting out. And I know that this isn't optimal in terms of like being able to do our damage. In this clip, we're going to have multiple people that just get clipped by all these. When we're in this situation and there's just swirls everywhere, it is way more important to just save the pull and just get out, as quite a few people did. but we do have 2 people die on this pull just because there's just not a lot of space. It is kind of a personal responsibility just based on how things spawn to just get out, but we did have a lot of deaths and also to mushrooms as well over all of our polls because we had 53 polls, 54 polls last week. And the most important part is just make sure that you are surviving and getting out. Whatever damage, whatever cooldowns you have right now, because there's no roots or anything, are just not going to be that impactful. And you just have to make sure that you can get out. And again, I only show this one because this one is like a really shitty set of abilities. But if I was, anyone here, the goal is just when these start, you notice the fire beam, just get away from the fire beam. And at this point, if you see just all this blue on the ground, just turn around and run away. There's really no other reason to be staying in. We have people that do get out, which is good. There is a pretty good safe spot over here that you like quickly move out of, but you just have to make sure that you get out of abilities quickly. In terms of positioning, I don't have a good POV for ranged, but to go over with range really quick, towards the end of the night, a lot of our pulls were much better in terms of positioning. Specifically, this Wipe 31, I think, is a pretty good example of what it should be looking like when we go from pull to pull. And we just need to make sure that it's mirrored and that we are just the same as melee have to have some agency of getting into their positions and staying alive for themselves. Ranged have to do the same thing. So we bait the thing at Moon that we're doing right now. We're dodging, and it's good that ranged have done a large segregation in kind of a line. Our 2 healers are in a good spot to be dispelled here, and right as they come out, the healers dispel and they move. 19 is identified, and this mage has identified that they don't have the stuff. Same with the balance druids, they all run in, and then we quickly form the line. Now, there is one downside about this positioning that we have here. This will be good positioning in terms of getting the dispels in a big line. However, this line is actually very, very large. These fire circles expand at a fairly slow rate. So someone like Flameborn, if he's number 2, needs to stay near the previous fire and just barely edge it. I believe Tig actually does a pretty good job here and does like some stutter stepping. But when we're in these positions, when you get your dispel, you should be as close to the previous fire as possible. So if you don't, you're going to have really bad spawns. Once we get to the end here, we get a freedom for Avi. He's able to just then blink in to get close to us. Dragon riding, come down, and we hit, and then we start moving out. Continuing this replay for just a minute, we have to be very aware of the same positioning when we get over to blue. I know that this is a wipe, just going to point this out. When we get over to blue, once we have our bait that occurs here, it's going to be range's job to immediately move off the stack and get to their next position. So right as these roots come out here at 51 seconds, it's immediately time for range to just start scooting out as we're doing all of our CC. The other really important part for this set, it seems a lot of people were not using personal mitigation here. This is the best time in the first probably 2 minutes of the fight to use your personal mitigation. There's some, reason to use it at 2 minutes when we're breaking the first shield on platform 2. But most people won't have both of them up. If you have personal mitigation, you just use it here. If when on the pulls where we're all alive and we get to the spot, we're breaking all of the roots, we're intentionally throwing healing cooldowns at the wall. We have Aura Mastery going, we have a Rally going, we have a Darkness and AMZ, but that won't be enough on its own. People will need their own mitigation, and then it's just on top of us to kill these roots as quickly as possible. Does anyone have any questions about just our general positioning for melee in terms of being under the boss and dodging as best they can, and then range for being in that kind of arc position that we need to have? Okay. Lastly, I think this is one of our, even though we have people dead, it's one of our better pulls in terms of getting to blue. But just to show this really quick in terms of like how important the feathers are from before, like when we have these feather spawns, we have some people that get to these feathers late. Once we get to these feathers late, if people don't get their dragons quickly enough and this goes off, you're not going to have much time. Pause actually does die here because his root was just on him a little too long and doesn't have the ability to get out. That last person that crashed the dragon also died. But more importantly, as we're moving over towards blue, we need to make sure that we are finding the safest spot possible. As we're planting here, there's not really any fire beams directly moving to our path, but right as this goes off and you can see all those raid frames appear, that's immediately time for you to break if you have a root, personal, and then immediately start going over to the X world marker that's off to our left. And I know that this is a pull where a lot of people died, and we're still learning as far as the healing and the mitigation. But right here, as these blue swirls are out, all these treants are running around, there should already be people moving over here towards this X world marker to find a safe spot for dispels. And as you see them that they pop up in just a moment here, there's already like multiple that are just under the boss. And regardless of that, this wipe, this pull is a wipe anyway because we've had all these people die. Moving to that spot is going to be the next important part to have that agency of us getting into position. And this will be like our biggest hurdle for this upcoming week is to make sure that once we get to blue, everyone stays alive. We get our ranged out and our ranged healers to the spot. This person that died did a really good job of getting over to the spot. Just unfortunate, too many people dead. And then we actually prog this phase. In terms of the dragon riding feathers, just to point out for the second group, if this is going to be where our dispels are, this first one that's right next to it is going to be our first yellow feather, the one that we don't want anyone to take unless they're like the people getting dispels. So if this is the dead one, this one here should be number 1. This one here should be number 2, 3, and 4 is like through all this shit that you can't see. But we would have the 2 that would be close to dispel people and the 4 as far away as humanly possible to be as safe as possible to guarantee that those people are not taking free damage from their dispels. So this is, again, this specific spot is where we'll spend probably most of our time next week on progression, and it'll be for that set of people that need to learn their dragon riding spots. Crash in, we just gate out of fire beams over to purple, and then we phase, and it should be nice and simple. But that's the general recap that I have for RP1. I think, again, it's mainly just working on the melee positioning and staying alive. Ranged, it's for keeping yourselves in a good tight arc, because we had a lot of attempts where they weren't doing that, but at the end of the night, they were doing much better. And then the feather groups just need to be on top of their stuff and identifying the safe place of where to go, which feathers are potentially going to be dangerous, and where you shouldn't take extra damage. That's all I have for it in terms of like a general recap of P1. Does anyone have any questions about P1, anything that we've done so far, any of the like nerf changes or things, any clarifications that you guys want me to make? Okay. This was that wipe, just showing that even though we had a lot of people dead, we can still get over to blue, and we just need to make sure that this clump of people moves over to X. Not super duper important if you do want to see. It's wipe 42 of the night. Just make sure that, again, range, once you get this, if you break roots, just start immediately cheating over to your spot. Not a huge deal because we're still really early into learning it. Once we get past this, we gate over to purple and the intermission happens. We're going to be working on our intermission. The biggest thing for intermission, it's pretty self-explanatory. We've done it a lot of times on normal and heroic as well. But there is like a quote-unquote fastest path. This seed or this green like buff that spawns on the right is pretty close. We'll take it, and then you kind of fly off to the left a little bit, take another one, and you can take a third, and then you can just dash straight to the platform. And the whole idea is to do like that jump thing off the platform, press the whirling surge forward, and then just constantly spam dash. You do want to have the extra dragon riding talent to give yourself 1 extra vigor. You can use that at the start to gain 1 of the 3 charges to just gain 1 extra vigor to make this first part even faster. But DPS and healers just want to get there as soon as possible because it is a large damage and healing check. For our tanks, we will be having tanks going far off to the left. There's a pretty easy path you have to take, and one of the tanks is going to go like starting high, then going really low, and then going really high again to get the last 3. Tanks don't do much damage here, and they're going to be the ones that'll live even if they're late on their dragons. Healers and DPS, you guys just got to make sure you get there as quickly as humanly possible, and you want to be on the platform before he lands. As he comes out, you can start applying dots, you can work into your ramp, and then you just need to blast the shield. It'll be around 2 minutes flat, and that is also when we will be lusting. People will have 1 minute cooldowns, 2 minute cooldowns back up most likely. But the biggest thing is
How
that
long
we
is
just
the
need to
shield?
blast that shield. In total, you have 15 seconds. There's a 3-second precast, and then the shield is on him for 15 seconds. I believe we have to do, it's like 20 million damage in 15 seconds to be able to break it. So people won't have cooldowns for this one. Like, people shouldn't have their big cooldowns because they should be using them for roots. However, with Lust and just residual cooldowns, we should be able to break it. If it feels really easy for us to break, we will push back the lust timing to 3 minutes instead. That will give a couple more classes a little bit more DPS, but more importantly, it's a pretty big time for healers. So we will feel it out until we have really conclusive evidence that we don't need lust for a shield. We will be lusting shield every time until we are certain that it's no longer a problem, mainly in early prog, especially if we have people dead, we need to burn them. The only other real thing to mention at the start of this intermission, when we're on this southern platform, you do have to be really careful because there are still fire beams. It kills a lot of people. Those fire beams, you can run into them when you're on your dragon riding mount, and it doesn't matter like their hitbox. If you go above them, even if like there's like a little cloud that they come out of, if you fly above that cloud, it's still going to kill you. So you just have to fly to the left or right of them and be aware that they are still like actively moving when we get off the platform. So if one of them is moving at the edge of the platform and you fly off and it like barely catches you, you're still just going to get one shot. And it's something that'll happen quite a few times. And if we can avoid it, we avoid it as best we can. But just make sure that you actively know your DPS like path and the tanks will know their path. And then just be really careful of getting off the platform. So we'll land, and then I have my raid plan for all of P2. But this is basically what I was talking about, is that we should just have, damage buffs, lust once we, get to the shield, and just break it as quickly as possible. Does anyone have any questions before I start talking about P2? Because this will all be new information. But if anyone has any like notes or they want any clarification on the previous stuff, I want to recap it as best I can.
I do have one question.
Sure, let's hear it.
So in P1, we were struggling on we were running to blue, not really running, but keeping ourselves alive.
Mm-hmm.
So what was happening there?
Well, so the first large thing is that we need to make sure that the dragon riding groups are set up correctly. Because again, this is a really like clean replay to show that like if the dragons are late, being able to get to star is already going to be hard. If that dragon collided a couple seconds early and this last dragon that's here, if they collided early, like when all of the swirly spawned, we would have a lot more time to collectively move to star. When we get over to star, we want to make sure that we bait correctly, and then once we're doing this run from star over to blue, unless you run into a fire beam, and these treants should obviously be dead, there should be no damage coming out when we're running over to here. The reason that we're taking damage here is because there are 3 treants alive, so we are ticking for 150k every second. Part of this is because the dragon riders were a little bit late. The other part of it is making sure that if these treants are up, they are gripped into the group and killed. Again, 3 dragons or 4 dragons colliding, 4 dragons last week colliding, we'll just kill everything. Like, we don't have to do any damage to the trees. But 3 or less from last week, we would need to put in a lot of damage. This one, assume that we got 2, and I assume that these weren't correctly gripped in. That's something that Frilly needs to, just make sure she gets. But this goes for a lot more people. This isn't just a Frilly thing. So there should be no trees here. So in a perfect scenario, we're running from star to blue, and we take 0 damage unless you run into a fire beam. Everyone, when we get over to here, again, we should be relatively topped off. And then once we hit all of our healer CDs and we all pop our mitigation, if we don't burn all of these treants quickly enough, then we die. The other part is that, like, we still had those 3 treants running in from star, and also someone over here was in a really bad spot that spawned a treant. That's just extra damage that we're not going to be able to turn off if it spawns like this, unless pause or Frilly grip it, and ideally we're all close enough at this point. So it's kind of a multitude of things. Dragon riding needs to be as quick as possible so we don't have to deal with those extra trees. Healers will keep us topped up, and then when we get to blue, we have to do as much damage as possible to mitigate the damage we would take. If hopefully that answers your question or is on the right track.
Yeah. Also, what about the save point that we were looking for?
Yeah, the save point we were looking for. This replay obviously doesn't show like great images of it. I could try to look through, Posner's replays to find like a really good pull. Generally speaking, it's always just going to be dirty. The ideal part is if every single person breaks their CC and we spawn all of the trees, we have as much room to just run around. It's like, We have people that can be over here just running away from fire seeds. Like, obviously, that person was pretty bad to have baited over there. But, like, the second that these roots come up, you break, and if there's a beam coming to you, like this one that seems to kind of go right through the edge of melee, you gotta sidestep it. If you're still in a root and, like, that last one comes in, like, I think it's this one where my mouse cursor is, just slowly creeps the group, there are groups where the roots are already dead before that even gets there. And, in fact, we had so many people dead, but a lot of those roots were taken care of. So it really just depends on our damage to make sure that we can get out of there quickly, and if you have a way to break the roots. Does that hopefully kind of give an answer to what we're looking for? I know that it's not like probable numerically, but that's the general idea of what we need to be doing.
Yeah, but
okay.
It's also
yeah, I got it. You said it's gonna be dirty.
Yeah. Go ahead,
It's
ADF.
also useful to mention that first line of the nerfs is less beam spawn in P1. So it's not really clear exactly what that means, but one theory is that instead of you'll get the baited beam, but you won't get the random other beam. So when we do that big move to blue, like if we don't get the random other beam, we'll be really far away from the beams and it will be cleaner. But no one knows exactly what that's going to look like until Tuesday. The servers come up.
And that's another big part of it. Idiaf is absolutely correct. The theory is that the mirrored beam doesn't appear. So like we bait this one here and we bait this one at star, but as you can see when like Pause turns his camera, there are like fire beams coming from off screen, like those ones. I think this might not exist. So if this doesn't exist, that means every single one of these fire beams is spitting out 50% less of these death rays because there's just half of these pools. And again, we'll have to feel it out and see what it feels like. I'll be doing my due diligence to find that answer out on Tuesday. But when we go on Wednesday, it'll probably be we see what happens when the first fire beam casts. And if there's not a second one, we're just going to have a tremendous amount of space and everything should be super easy. If it means something else, hopefully it's easier, but we won't know until we see it. But Idiaf is absolutely correct. This right here is probably going to be significantly easier on Wednesday and going forward. We just don't know how easy, so to speak.
But then once you get into phase 3, because I think it specifically said only in phase 1, so
Correct.
phase 3 will probably look like this and be hell again.
Yeah. Anyone else? Questions? P1 intermission. Anything we've talked about thus far? And again, please, if you have a question, ask it. There's a chance that other people aren't speaking up or don't have a mic and they're not saying it, but we want to make sure that everything is as clear as possible for people. Okay. When we get into P2, I have this raid plan. I'm going to go over it very briefly. Just kind of go over the general points of P2, because again, P2 is going to be another whole set of progression. It did get pretty heavily nerfed, so it'll probably be easier than other groups, but this is what we'll have to be dealing with. First off, when we get here, we're lusting. If our damage is good, then we will push it back. Because I am not in, we will need one of our officers to be putting down a moon and a diamond marker. They should be roughly at these positions, like this little thorn that's here, and then about halfway through this swirly over here. Officers have been told about this, so no one, almost no one in here will have to worry about it. This phase, though, no more fire beams, but there are the blue swirlies that we did in P1, the mushrooms that the tanks have to do, dispels that range have to do. There are 2 sets of dragon riders. There are still roots, but now there are seeds. This is repeated 1 time, so 2 full sets, just like in P1, with a different pattern towards the end and the middle. So basically everything that we did in P1 is repeated, but there is a different pattern. The biggest goal for us is for everyone to understand the pattern when we get there, because if you understand the pattern, you can use your P1 knowledge to just deal with the mechanics in a very similar fashion. The only one that's not applicable, obviously, is seeds, because we don't have seeds in P1. First set that's going to come out, we have dispels that are going on. When dispels and blue swirlies go on, we're going to do it the exact same way, where we have ranged healers dispelling themselves immediately at moon, and then we're doing this kind of wall, again, just like previous, going over to diamond. The important thing is that we want this wall to be a relatively straight, flat wall. I'll get into why that is the case, and we want to make sure that it is pretty confined. We don't want to have a lot of extra space. We don't want to be putting them in weird spots. We want to be putting them in relatively confined pattern. Just like P1, We have our Dragon Riders that are going to come out, and just as before, as like I showed in those replays, we want them to be the safe picks, and then it'll be the same people from 1. So like whoever was 1 last week is 1 here, 2 is here, 3 is here, 4 in here, and then these 2 will be assigned to people to make sure that they take, so we have to deal with less routes. But again, we want to make sure that you take one that is mirrored to the same way as the dispels. So 1 is near the first dispel, 2, 3, 4 are going around the boss counterclockwise, mirroring the dispels that
There's
are going
only
clockwise.
3 of the orbs now, right?
So there are only 3 orbs in the sky, but we still get 6 feathers. So we could have 6 people jump on dragons and go fly around and fight for 3 orbs. We are still assigning these people. As you can see here, both groups are still going to have them assigned, but there's going to be 1 less person that needs to actively fly around. Reason that we are doing this is because if you pick up a feather, you cannot get targeted by the Roots ability. So if, say for example, Boinky is our number 1 here, if he doesn't Dragon Ride, but he picks up this seed, that's 1 less thing we have to worry about killing when we're all stacked up. That also gets him his ability to use his freedom on someone else. He can move if there's other shit going on. It just makes the fight easier from an optimization standpoint. But yes, we will only have 3 bombs to deal with. Again, I don't know where those bombs spawn. So I have these 4 listed locations. We need to see how the pattern changes. But in ideal situation, if like say this bomb just doesn't exist anymore, it's just not there, and the rest of this pattern stays the same, we're going to be telling like, hey, 1, you're not doing this part anymore. It's something that we really have to see because again, we don't know the orientation of the bomb spawns for next week. I will try to figure it out and update us on Wednesday, and probably update this raid plan by Wednesday. But this is the general idea, is that 1 has their bomb, 2, 3, 4 have their bombs, and you want to make sure you're going to your bomb based on your location. And when we say, hey, this person is no longer doing dragon riding, if you're number 1, you just pick up the seed and you just go onto the boss. There's nothing else for you to do. But 2, 3, 4 will have to still do bombs, etc. Whatever we decide that plan. And again, I'll have more information for you guys on Wednesday about who specifically is not. But the seeds are still going to be assigned in the same pattern. By the time that we have 3 and 4 going, same thing, Zorbus Tiger's Lust, Ash Freedoms these people as we get roots. This first one is going to be really easy because Dragon Riders are helping with it, so we don't need to worry too much. Just crash into it. Same as before, really big agency, and then we'll need grips on 3 and 4 here. This is where the fight gets new. We have to deal with the seeds. There is an important note over here, but I'll get to that in a minute. After we do the roots, right as it finishes, right as you can move, there are going to be 12 seeds that spawn around the boss, just like Heroic. Only 12, and we need people to actively go and soak them. It doesn't matter what class does, tanks, healers, ranged, melee, everyone has the ability to soak a seed, but there's only 12 of them after this nerf. So as long as we have people run into 12 seeds and take a seed, we will not wipe. You have a total of 5 seconds to do it. The seed will hurt you a little when you pick it up, but it's not lethal. And when you pick it up, you will now get a debuff that makes it so you cannot touch another one. And I don't mean like, oh, you're going to die. I mean you literally just can't pick up another one even if you run over it and you're going to be standing there. So when you run and you pick up one of your seeds, if you know you're done, turn your ass around and run back to the boss, because we need other people to realize that if you're standing out near a seed, you're not about to soak it. You're actively you have the debuff and you're done. So again, when you pick up a seed, instantly turn yourself around and run back to the boss to make sure that everyone else can identify who has or who hasn't soaked. And there's only 12. We have 20 people. We should be able to do it relatively easily with this nerf. I think this is probably one of the bigger parts of this fight that got nerfed, and it should be pretty easy for us to identify who can take them and just take them. There is one caveat to this. If our ranged healers are slow at dispelling, and this 4th fire pool hasn't fully expanded yet, there is a chance that a seed spawns in fire and then the fire expands over it. The important thing here is that we will have at least one assigned ranged that is actively going to be looking into the fire. Preferably one of our mages that are over here, that are standing at the farthest waypoint or just blinking to get one of the far ones. They will be looking into the fire to see if they need to do a call out to get one that is in a really bad spot. And again, standing in the fire will do 200k per second. So you just have to run in, soak the seed, and get out. It'll probably require a personal if that does happen. But that means that ranged healers and just healers in general need to be really fast on their dispels. If we're not fast, we have this scenario happen, and there's like a seed that's just in the fire, and we die, and it feels really bad. There is one other thing to note. When I say that we have 5 seconds to deal with this ability, that's when the seeds wipe us. When that 5 seconds is over, the next ability starts immediately. We're back to dispels. So once we finish seeds, it's onto the tanks to just backpedal, kite the boss away, and we just repeat our dispels. Melee, there is literally nothing happening here. This is about the 3-minute mark where you guys should have your cooldowns. You guys could be ripping into the boss because there's not a really big need for DPS on seeds in this phase. So if you guys have CDs, double check Lorgs. This is a pretty good time to just throw your cooldowns at the wall and just deal some extra damage to Tindral because only ranged have an ability coming out right now. Right as it finishes, we have another set of seeds. So as Dispel 4 finishes, we all run in, get our seeds to our spread locations, and then we still want to have someone looking into the fire to make sure that no seeds are spawning in fire. Right after this finishes, however, the next thing immediately happens where we have roots that we need to DPS. So this is going to be a time for big DPS, and this is at the 3-minute mark. So a lot of people will have their big cooldowns back up, and most people should have like a minute or 2-minute CDs to burn at this mark for these seeds. So again, it'll be dispels are happening. Right as the force person gets dispelled, if we're doing it instantly, the seeds will come out. We all soak a seed, and then you have about 2 seconds to sprint into the middle and get under the boss to do the next set of roots. And again, these roots are without dragons, so you need to have big CDs here. You do not want to break roots here because there's about a 6-second overlap where there are no abilities coming out. So again, just like P1, we broke all these roots on this one. You do not want to break roots on this one. We are basically out of healer CDs at this moment. You just need to actively cleave these down, and it needs to go relatively fast. When this finishes, most groups have about 3 seconds before the next set of mushrooms come out. So in ideal situation, our tanks are freed, and they start backpedaling again for the second round of all the abilities, where we have our third dispel of this platform. Dragon riding people are doing dragon riders, tanks are doing their mushrooms, and then we have a set of roots that are being helped with dragons. Once this third set of roots is finished, the boss transitions immediately. Our goal is to be 45% here. So that's like our mark that we want to hit when we actually get off this platform. Next week, just as a side note, our goal is to make it to slide 7. So on our next week, we want to get to this point where we're doing the second dispel of the fight, and we're burning our active roots that we have. So like once we do the second set of roots, that's our goal. But this is where we want to see by the end of next week, ideally. But this phase, again, it is different in cadence. It'll be the same at the start where we're doing dispels, mushrooms, blue swirlies, dragon riding, like all that's the same. But when we get to this point, we do seeds instead of baiting a fire beam. And then the intermission, instead of it being like we bait another fire beam and we run really far and we have to deal with roots, we have another set of dispels, another set of seeds, and then we're back into the roots and into the cadence. So it's really important to make sure you know what abilities come out when and how we actively want to be dealing with them. I know that was a whole shit ton. I didn't give a lot of time for questions, but we'll give time for questions now, and if no one has any questions, we'll basically be done for the day. But does anyone have any questions about what we should be looking to do in P2? If you have like specific things about your classes, I can show you how to look those up. But this is open time. Who has questions about P2?
I'm good.
Okay. So if everyone's good with P2, then that ends the general part of the strat talk. I did want to leave you guys with one last tidbit that I recently found out with Lorgs. Everyone here should be familiar with what Lorgs is and be actively using them. If you're not, there is a little what is this panel up here, lorgs.io. It is incredibly helpful to look at what other people of your class are doing. I'm just going to take a random example because this is something I did earlier. Let's say you're playing a Fury Warrior and like, hey, I don't know what to do on this fight. You click on your Fury Warrior, you go up here, and you can click this Tindral Sage Swift button, and it's going to show you the top 50 logs for all Fury Warriors across the board and what they have done on their Tindral kills. You can sort it by what abilities the boss is actively casting, what abilities those warriors are casting, what abilities they're casting in terms of like their consumables, and if they're getting things like externals. Like, wow, I'm always dying here. I'm not getting any healing. Maybe I can get a cocoon or a pain suppression or something. Well, I can tell you right now, there are no warriors out of the top 50 that are getting pain sup, and there's only 2 that have ever gotten a cocoon. So you're probably doing something wrong if you feel like you're dying a lot in these fights. Health potion, I always health potion in P1. Doesn't really seem like that's necessarily the play. It looks like you want to do it in P2 around this 3-minute or farther mark. When we are taking a lot more damage from all those overlaps of abilities, or at the end of the fight, just to live to make sure your team can get there. In terms of when am I going to pop my ultimate power potion, it looks like every single one of them is popping it basically when the second set of roots spawn in P1. So that's probably where you want to use it. And then back here when we're killing the other set in P3, you probably want to be using them there. Hey, where do warriors spell reflect? Well, this is a lot of information. How can I make this easy for myself to digest? If you go over here to this log, this rank 1, I want to use my spell reflect at the same time he does. Click this little copy button. You can put in your character's name. My character's name is Lolstorm if I'm playing Warrior, and this will present to you a note that you can put into ERT or MRT, and you can just have this personal timer for yourself. You can import this, show it in your personal note, and then your K's weak aura that we have as a mandatory weak aura will just pop up and say, hey, you're pushing Spell Reflect this time. It'll only broadcast it to you. But you could go a lot further than that. Hey, I want to use Avatar at the same time. I want to use Thunderous Roar at the same time. I want to use Recklessness at the same time. I want to use this, and I want to use this. Boom, there's your personal note for the entire fight. You can just copy this shit down. You can paste it into your ERT, and then you are prepped for the fight. Your weak aura will literally play the game for you and tell you what cooldowns to press where, and you can do this with any class in the game. Just make sure you put in your character name. Would highly recommend doing this for pretty much everyone if you don't have a personal note already. And if you want a different resource, I can help you with different resources to get your personal notes up. But I would seriously suggest that everyone takes the time to look at this for their class, figure out what abilities that they want to know where to use, and just mirror the top logs. And if you're looking at things like, hey, my rallying cry seems to be only being used here. Like, we can talk to you about, like, hey, can I get another use of it here or whatnot? Like, and that goes for every class and every spell. If you're like, hey, I have this thing. It looks like not a lot of people are using it here. I have it up. Let's use it. Or, hey, why are we bloodlusting at a certain time? Why are we bloodlusting here instead of there? You can ask those questions just by seeing that information. So just keep that in mind that this is an incredibly good resource, and I highly encourage everyone to go and use it for yourself. And if you do have any questions with it, I can help you out. But unless there are any questions, that's really all I had for tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording now. And then if anyone has any last minute